Welcome to The Complete Works, an official podcast of FilmBook. The Complete Works is a podcast that delves film by film into the filmography of a Hollywood actor, director, writer, or composer.
Hello everyone, and welcome to The Complete Works podcast, a film podcast brought to you by FilmBook. My name is Doug Hass. If you're tuning in to Complete Works podcast for the first time, what I do in this podcast is discuss a specific movie from a film actor, actress, director, or composer's film career. I'm currently working my way through Tom Cruise's career, and in this episode of the Complete Works podcast, I'll be discussing the film Born on the 4th of July. You can find out more information about the Complete Works podcast by going to FilmBook, that's film-book.com, or by simply searching the term The Complete Works. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast service, please rate and review this episode. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, please go ahead and like our video, subscribe, and consider becoming one of our patrons at patreon.com/FilmBook. Your support helps us create more engaging content. As we mentioned, we are going to be looking at Tom Cruise's film Born on the 4th of July. It was released in 1989, and it runs approximately 2 hours and 25 minutes, directed by Oliver Stone and written by Ron Kovic and Mr. Oliver Stone, starring Tom Cruise. So if you haven't seen this film, or you haven't seen this film in a while, let me just give you a quick overview of what the story is about. It's based on the true story of Ron Kovic, who is an idealistic young American proudly enlisting during the Vietnam War and returns home, unfortunately, as a paralytic. He struggles to overcome drug addiction, depression, and he turns his life around to become an outspoken critic of the war. So that just kind of gives you a quick overview of what the film is all about. Let's go ahead and start by kicking things off, letting you know what I thought of the film. So when I remember watching this film back in '89 when it first came out, saw it in the theater, and I ended up seeing it back to back. I saw it on a Friday night and ended up going and seeing it on a Saturday night. And at first, I did not like the film. I thought it was too long, and I was also very young, and I really didn't get or understand the message that was being shared with me in this film. I'll be completely honest. At the time, and like I said, I was young. I really thought it was more of an anti-American film. It wouldn't be until I matured, got a little older, realizing that was not the case in terms of that. So I have grown as not only an individual, but also I've grown when it comes to reviewing and watching film. In my maturity, I would say that I've definitely grown to appreciate this film much more than I did when I first watched the film. In terms of that, so that's kind of what I originally thought of the film. To start out with, I had a chance, as you know, to sit down and rewatch this film again, and like I said, it really comes back to where I've appreciated this film a little bit more. And like I said, at the beginning, I did not realize that both Oliver Stone and Mr. Kovac is writing basically an apology for Vietnam. This is something that's been uttered and stated by Oliver Stone, who actually fought there, and then, of course, with Ron Kovic, he became paralyzed from the chest down in Vietnam. So both of them had served. I think you could argue definitely that Ron had a little bit more higher price than Oliver Stone in terms of that. What's really great, I think both of them had a gung-ho patriotism for their country, but when they came back, there was still a patriotism there, but it was just that there was a lot more hurt and misunderstanding in terms of that. Both men really turned against the war, and I think Kovac is more dramatic than Oliver Stone. Obviously, Ron, he's in a wheelchair, and he got thrown out of the 1972 Republican Convention, which covered in towards the end of that. In 76, he addresses the Democratic Convention, and you can say that his 76 speech was basically a beast beating in the Supreme Soviet. We do apologize for our mistakes in this country, but we let out our artists do it instead of politics or politicians. And I wrote that down as I was doing a little bit of research on that, and it kind of really stuck out to me that, when Ron says that, he is saying that, we want to make an apology, but instead of the politicians do it, we let our artists, we say it in other ways and expression, which I thought was kind of interesting in terms of that film. So some other things that I think makes this very interesting is that, we find that Kovac, after he's paralyzed, he comes back home. As you can imagine, he is depressed, both with his mind and with his spirit and body in terms of that. And so he has to fight some of these demons on his own. And we see this by him going to Mexico, battling booze, drugs, and women as well in terms of this. Then he began to look outside of himself for a larger pattern or a larger purpose for his life. And then this is when he kind of writes Born on the 4th of July, which is a best-selling autobiography. We also wanted to look at Oliver Stone in this. He had done a film, I'm not going to say similar because there's some similarities in here, but a little different. Platoon, where he talks about some of his own war experiences in there as well, with some major stars, as you see within Born on the 1st of July. What I think is really interesting with having Tom Cruise in here, you have Tom Cruise as a leading man, okay? Nothing that Tom Cruise has done prior to Born on the 4th of July really prepares you, the viewer, to see Tom Cruise like this. For example, Risky Business, one of the first films, something we've already talked about on the Complete Works podcast. He's a great American actor. He's kind of clean cut, and he kind of goes through some stages as a young man in terms of that. Top Gun, we become overwhelmed with special effect displays when it comes to Top Gun. Cocktail, let's go with Color of Money. Cocktail, both of those are using his beauty, attractive image, if you will, to try to sell. I think that's more true with Cocktails than it was with Color of Money, but you could see him starting to form as an actor. We get to last week's episode, Rain Man. In terms of that, I think there was something Tom Cruise was kind of holding back in that performance, but in this performance, Born on the 4th of July, I think we see a completely different Tom Cruise, somebody that really just kind of explodes. He's not the clean-cut image. He is kind of a fresh face and a fresh voice, and I think that's what Oliver Stone was able to get out of him in this performance in terms of that. You see a dramatic change of Tom Cruise. He's very patriotic at the beginning, and I think you could argue he's still patriotic at the end, even though he's anti-war. Doesn't make him any more less of an American. It just has different priorities in terms of that. He starts off with the all-American good boy image, clean cut, shaved, athletic, and then you see him try to find himself after he gets shot in Vietnam, and he is really refining himself in the process. What is really interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the podcast, but you take a film like Platoon and 4th of July, Born on the 4th of July. In Platoon, and that's a film that when I'm watching it, every time it's on, it's hard for me to pass that up. But within Platoon, there was a lot of confusion. I think that really captivates what was going on during the Vietnam War. You didn't know who was shooting at you, where it was coming from. We're on Born on the 4th of July. I think Oliver Stone takes a very different approach, and he makes you know that there's a lot more clarity in the film, who's shooting at who, and what happens. And I think that really captivates and hones in on the mistake that Ron made, and that unfortunately led to him being injured in the process. So that's kind of a quick overview of the two films. One is showing a firefight of confusion in Platoon, where in Born on the 4th of July, it's more clarity, what was going on, and that was done, I think, on purpose by Oliver Stone to really show what led to Ron's injury during Vietnam in terms of that. William Dafoe is in here. He co-stars in the film. So does Tom Berenger. He's at the beginning of the film. He's the Marine that gives the inspiring speech that really gets Tom Cruise's character fired up and ready to go, and really helping him fall in love with something he already knew that he was in love with in terms of that. I think something else that this film does, it really shows a lot of pain and bloodshed and the suffering that happened not only with Ron, but I think with a lot of our vets, and really makes it real and really brings home the pain and the suffering that some of these veterans, and I think you could argue that all the veterans have faced in their military service. And not necessarily just for Vietnam, but obviously that's what we're focusing here on this. Something else we want to talk about is some characters. Obviously, we talked about Tom Cruise's character throughout the film and his role and how that plays. Really want to talk about Raymond Berry, who plays Tom Cruise's father, one of the characters in the movie, especially at the beginning. When he comes home, I think his parents, they wanted to be sympathetic, they wanted to be good parents, but I don't think they knew what to do in terms of that. And so they were just as confused, I think, as Tom Cruise's Ron was when he came home. He knew he had to take this on himself. He wasn't ever going to be the same as he was prior to the war. And I think Raymond Berry does a wonderful job of showing that confusion, that struggle of, I want to be helpful, I want to be supportive, but I'm really not sure how my son's going to react and what he wants in terms of that. So I think that was a good turning point within the film as well. Obviously, we talk about Tom Berenger. He gives that great speech at the end, or at the beginning of the movie, excuse me. And William Dafoe, who was also in Platoon. He plays a crippled veteran in the desert in that, and I think he does a wonderful job too. It always helps when you have kind of names that kind of pop out to individuals when they're watching a film. Maybe not so much in '89 when William Dafoe was still building his career, but now as we look back, I think that's something that is definitely captures individuals. When we look at this film against other genre, one is obviously, Platoon. We want to look at this film, Born on the 4th of July, versus Platoon. I think what is kind of interesting with Platoon, we've kind of already talked about it to a degree. Platoon shows the confusion, whereas Born on the 4th of July really narrows down and shows the mistake and then what has to be a lasting decision that Ron has to be with throughout the end of that. Another one that kind of jumps to my mind is Casualties of War. That came out in '89 as well. It ran about an hour and 53 minutes. Basically, when we look at this film, it's also during the Vietnam War. A girl is taken from the village by five American soldiers. Four of the soldiers rape, but the fifth refuses to do so. The girl is killed, and the fifth soldier is determined that justice will be done. And the film really becomes more of a realities of war than really any single event in terms of that. It starred Michael J. Fox, Sean Penn. It was an okay film, but I really think that Born on the 4th of July and Platoon were two more powerful films that really showed, especially Platoon. I remember Platoon at the time really getting a lot of credit of showing what Vietnam, or as close of what Vietnam was like for our soldiers during that conflict in terms of that. And when we look at that, looking at the Platoon, a lot of people, like I said, really look at that as one of the most realistic portrayals of Vietnam War. And I think it does that by a couple standards. One is showing the highlighting of the soldiers' morale and the psychological struggles that they faced during that experience that is just, unbelievable and hard for people to get their heads around unless you really live there. Three other films real quick. Full Metal Jacket, The Deer Hunter, and Apocalypse Now, I think are other genres that really fit into this. Full Metal Jacket, I think the basic camp scene at the beginning is really an eye-opener, and by many is praised because it has such dark humor, a lot of intense realism, and a critical war commentary all built in together when it comes to Full Metal Jacket. That came out, let's see here, in 1987, and it ran for about an hour and 56 minutes. Like I said, a lot of people give a lot of praise for that. We also want to look at The Deer Hunter. That was a little earlier, 1978. It ran for 3 hours and 3 minutes. But it really a powerful film, a lot of strong performances, especially by Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken. It too talks about Vietnam War and the impact on individuals and communities. And a lot of people really praise the film for the storytelling that it does and for the emotional depth that it goes into. Very powerful film in terms of that. And then finally, we want to talk about Apocalypse Now. That came out in 1979, ran for about 2 hours and 27 minutes. Martin Sheen's in that, Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall. The list goes on in terms of that. It's praised for its stunning visual, strong performance, and deep psychological insights. Martin Sheen and both Marlon Brando deliver unforgettable roles in terms of this. It, again, shows the chaos and the horror that is often associated with war. And I think that's really captivated by all these films that we talked about. Very powerful films, and each of them in their own way in terms of that. What do I think about this film? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would I rate this? 1 being terrible, 10 being, just outstanding. I would say that I would give it a 7. That I think on a scale of 1 to 10, a 7. In terms of that, I would not have given it such a high number earlier in my career, but thank goodness that we grow as individuals, and the more that I look at film, study film, I can appreciate it a little more, and so definitely would give that a 7 out of 10 on the scale. And it's a film that if you've seen it and it's been a while, I strongly encourage you to go back and rewatch it. And if you haven't seen it, again, I would encourage you to go out and watch that film for the first time if you haven't seen it before. I think you'll be very, very pleased with it in terms of that. The music for this, a lot of oldies but goodies that are in this film. Just give you an idea of what's on there. You're a Grand Old Flag, Rock Around the Clock, Venus, My Girl, The Times Are A-Changin' by Bob Dylan, American Pie by Don McLean, Brown Eyed Girl, are just a few of the songs that are on there. Like I said, a lot of them are older songs, but it fits the time. Those songs fit the time and fit what is going on perfectly. So the soundtrack is awesome in terms of that. Box office, this is kind of interesting in terms of that. So it had a budget of approximately $14 million. Opening weekend, it made about $172,000 for the opening weekend, but it grossed in the U.S. and Canada about $70 million and grossed worldwide $161 million, which I think is interesting for really an anti-war film. So did very well based on its budget. Like I said, $14 million to make, and it ended up grossing worldwide about $161 million in terms of that. So, and what's the other interesting filming locations in the Philippines, Vietnam, and Mexico were some of the 3 areas that they were filming in